Oh, nak seri.
Satu, dua, tiga. Hi, welcome back everyone. We are very sorry for the delay because we are adjusting some of the technical issue. In view of our second talk, will be done virtually as our next speaker, Dr. Hafizah Hashim, will be presenting from Kedah. I hope everyone is ready as we are about to continue our program today. Now is the second talk by Dr. Hafizah Hashim from Hospital Sultanah Bahiyah, Kedah. Allow me to give a brief introduction about our next speaker. Dr. Hafizah Hashim is a hematopathologist of Hospital Sultanah Bahiyah from Al-Setar and is currently the head of pathology there. She obtained her master's degree in 2010, followed by subspecialty training in molecular thalassemia in Institute of Molecular Biosciences, Mahidol University, Thailand. We are very delighted to have her with us virtually today. Please welcome Dr. Hafizah Hashim for her talk in HB analysis, pearl and pitfalls in thalassemia screening and presumptive diagnosis using hemoglobin analysis.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everyone. Boleh dengar saya ke?
Boleh, Doktor.
Okay. So I was given a task by the organizing committee to give a speak on the pros and pitfall in thalassemia screening and presumptive diagnosis using hemoglobin analysis. Actually, this topic is a combination of presentation that I've presented previously in FA and also in MBC last month. So for those who have already attended my lecture for the previous two, probably you can have a okay. So I proceed with my presentation. Actually, the content is I have four issues here to be presented in a brief. The second one, more big issues in capillary electrophoresis, as majority of us use capillary electrophoresis as a first line method. The third one, a common variant as a first line, and the last part is just a sharing discrepancy between presumptive diagnosis using HB analysis and confirmatory molecular diagnosis. Okay. So basically, this is a brief introduction. Thalassemia in Malaysia, Dr. Nora have presented earlier. Actually, in Semenanjung, HBE beta is the most common one, and according to the ethnic, in our country, Malays and other indigenous is the majority ethnic, plus Chinese, and others. And we have two main DDT, HBE and beta thal major. In HBE, beta thal is Malay, is the predominant ethnic, whereas in Sabah, in Kadazan Dusun, beta thalassemia major is main categories of patients. So in Kedah, actually, Kedah is the highest state with a registered thalassemia patient, around 9%. Majority patient is from the data. In 2000, based on the thalassemia screening program, we have a study. Out of 11 districts in Kedah, the red one is the prevalence, the higher prevalence of alpha thalassemia, whereas for the blue color is for the HBE trait. thalassemia. So mainly we have two common thalassemia in Kedah, which is HBE and alpha thalassemia. So this is a Malaysia thalassemia screening program. I think Dr. Nora have explained earlier. No need for me to explain anymore. So we have three methods still available in our country, which is CE, gel electrophoresis, which is this method is quite old method. Some centers still use this method because it is cheap. And actually the CE is a qualitative method, and we have two reliable quantitative method available in the market that we frequently use, which is a HPLC and CE. So I think majority of us already use these two methods for more than 10 years already, right? So we go to the issues with a small peak. First, I start with at zone 15 or at HBH zone, whether this peak is significant or not, or is it just an analytical issues? For the case series, I have a first 4 case series. As we can see here, all of these cases are selected from the thalassemia screening program. The age is between 16 to 17 years old. And as we can see, based on the full blood count indices, the HB is a normal HB with 12.1 up to 14.5 HB level. The MCV, and the MCH for case number 1 shows a quite high MCV, which is more than 80, a slightly low MCH, which is 24. For the case number 2, also the same. For the case number 3 is a lower MCV and MCH, which is less than 80 and less than 25, similar to case number 4. The RBC morphology for the screening sample is not really, it just shows us the mild microcytic hypochromic anemia. It does not make any differences between the 4 cases. When we do the HB typing using CE as first method, we can see there is presence of the major hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin A and A2, with a presence of a small peak in the case number 1, which is 0.3%. For the case number 2, actually, it does not quantitate in the chromatogram. I will show it later. But there is a small bump there, but described by our pathologist and was referred to us for the NDA analysis. For the case number 3, presence of the hemoglobin E, besides the A and A2, there is a E with a HBH peak as well with a 0.3%, similar to the case number 4. Okay. So this is the chromatogram as well as the morphology. I only have the morphology for case number 1, but the morphology is just the same. So this is the HBH peak, which is a 0.3%. But the case number 2, actually, I cannot really visualize, but our pathologist is sensitive enough to pick the peak there at the zone 15. For the case number 3 and number 4, the HBH peak is quite prominent with a 0.3%, and the HBE is at a different level, which is for case number 3 is 25.3%, for the case number 4 is 23%. We also have the HPLC. The HPLC shows that 26.3% of the A2 in case number 4. So what is the findings based on the molecular screening throughout alpha thalassemia? So we receive a case of coding by HB analysis D13, D16, C5 for case number 3 and number 4. So as we can see for case number 3, with the similar full blood count indices in case number 2, with a small peak at zone 15, actually by DNA analysis that we do with our 13 common mutation shows a normal alpha globin gene, mean that we cannot detect any common mutation here. For the case number 2, even though the small HBH peak there, which is uncalculated, shows a presence of 3.7 deletion, which shows the similar, more or less the similar indices as case number 1. For the case number 3 and number 4, For the case number 3, we cannot detect any common mutation, but for the case number 4, we can see the single gene deletion of 3.7, which the differences that we can compare here, the level of E, which is 23% in case number 4, and is higher in case number 3, which is 25.3%. So for the screening sample, based on the case, we use a cutoff less than 25 for D13 and D16. The aim is to detect for double gene deletion. So previously, when we see the HBH peak, when we use the CE as a first method, we say that any small peak at zone 15 should be reported and suggest for DNA analysis. Actually, we just, the aim is the opportunity to screen for the single gene deletion. And when I do the retrospective analysis, out of a 200 plus sample, 8.3% from the Form 4 screening sample, which shows the small HBH peak, which is less than 0.5%. In 1,000 sample, we expected to see this HBH peak around 83 sample. So is it significant? From 200 DNA sample, we only found that 14 cases with D16 and D16 with a small HBH peak at zone 15, and a majority of the cases, more than 70%, show no common mutation detected. And all cases with a positive single gene deletion, either 3.7 or 4.2 deletion, shows the MCH is less than 25 picogram. So it means that it's just not really, the small HBH peak does not really support the mutation, the deletion. So we need to use the D13 as a cutoff regardless of the HBH peak to screen for the gene deletion in alpha thalassemia. Another question, this is a frequently asked question about C5. What is the cutoff value for alpha screening in HBE carrier using HPLC or CE? I have two literature review here. One is from our local data from Hospital Sultanah Nur Zahirah Kuala Terengganu. They use a Form 4 student as well to look for the co-inheritance of alpha thalassemia with HBE trait. And they have around 1,000 plus sample with showing that they have suggested that E less than 23% can be safely used as a cutoff value to predict co-inheritance alpha thalassemia in HBE trait. But the sample size is quite small. Probably we need to validate on this study. Is this a good study? Is a good start? We can use this data to validate our findings. The second study is from Chiang Mai University. They use a different methods. They use the HPLC, which for the molecular diagnosis, they use a cyber-green HRM methods, which is different from us. We use GAP and ARMS PCR. Their study only focus on the double gene deletion. So they suggest to use a cutoff value for E using HPLC less than 24%, which is more superior by using the MCV less than 80 than MCH less than 27 to differentiate E with or without alpha 0 thalassemia. So they found that out of 1,000 plus sample, 18.4% sample was diagnosed as heterozygous E, and 200 plus sample, which is about 2.2%, were E with alpha 0 thal. The limitation of this study is they didn't screen for the alpha mutation, as in our local data shows that constant spring is very common in our country, right? So this is the table of the cutoff value using CE in Terengganu. The data is more or less just the similar finding that we found in our DNA molecular diagnosis center. Just one sample that I've really question is a deletion of 4.2 shows that the E is 17.9%, which is usually, if you see here, a single gene deletion shows a higher E level, which is more than 20% most of the time. So we need more samples to validate this finding. And for the Thailand study in Chiang Mai, I think the MCV, the MCH, the cutoff value is valid to use for the double gene deletion, where we can see the E level in HPLC is around 20% for the double gene deletion. Without double gene deletion, the E is higher. The cutoff value for the E is higher, which is more than 24%. So this is our data. We have around 117. We are validating the findings. I think more or less similar to the Terengganu study. And I think we can use the cutoff value for, it depends on us whether we want to, if you want to screen for the double gene deletion, probably we can use the E range of less than 20%. But if you don't want to miss the single gene deletion, probably the cutoff value of less than 24% that we can use in our population. And for the mutation, the E cutoff value is higher. This one we need to look, especially ADANA, because ADANA we don't have a presumptive diagnosis in the HB analysis. So we need to have more data to validate on these findings, because as we know that ADANA is quite significant when it combined with another mutation. So we move on to another case series, which is case 5, 6, and 7. Case number 5 is actually a 28 years old male. It came with a cascade screening after the brother was found to be positive as thalassemia carrier. The full blood count indices shows a slightly low HB level, which is 11.6, with a high RBC count and significant microcytic hypochromic anemia. For case number 6, as we can see, this is quite old female, adult with a 54 years old. Actually was sent to us because of the anemia, investigated for the anemia with HB level of quite severe, 5.6, with the very low microcytic hypochromic anemia and low RBC count. And case number 7 is a 30-year-old female. Is a cascade screening from a sister, was diagnosed as an alpha thalassemia trait, came in with a HB of 8.6 with a very significant microcytic hypochromic anemia. The RBC morphology shows an N-isopoikilocytosis. When we do the HB typing, it shows that presence of a normal hemoglobin, which is A, and minor hemoglobin A2, with a small peak at zone, HBH zone, which is calculated as 0.7. Looks like it's just a trait, a thalassemia trait. And case number 6 is, this one is quite significant peak at zone 12. Zone 12, usually we will say most of our cases will show there is a HB bars, right? But this is an adult sample. For the case number 7, actually is just a clean HB typing by CE, shows normal A and minor A2. So what is the chromatograms looks like? As we can see, the morphology first. We look at the morphology for the case number 1. This is an isopoikilocytosis for all the cases. And if we are really familiar with the HBH disease, we might suspect, based on the morphology alone, we can say that, oh, this case probably a HBH disease. So usually, if I saw these morphological changes, I would like to ask for the second method. For the case number 1, our pathologists have missed that, or probably this is just a trait, so no need for the second method. So when look at the morphological changes, I said try to run for the HPLC. And in our center, we still run the H inclusion. Why? Because sometimes when we suggest for the NA analysis, some of the clinician does not send the sample. So it's comfortable for us to diagnose HBH disease with 2 methods of HB analysis supporting by the H inclusion. if without the DNA analysis, is it safe enough for us to say it's a highly suggestive of HBH disease? So when we do the H inclusion, for the case number 5, it shows a few H inclusion. For the case number 6, with a many H inclusion. For the case number 7, actually no H inclusion seen. So this is a features of chronic hemolysis, probably in a HBH disease. This is our presumptive diagnosis based on HB analysis. So what is the finding? Based on the chromatogram, as I described earlier, this case number 5, just a small HBH peak here. But when we run for the HPLC, the HBH peak, the pre-run peak is quite high, is around 7.5%. Even though usually we are not calculated the pre-run peak, right, based on the percentage, but we can use as a guide. For the case number 6, despite setting here, usually we expect in HBH in adult, it will have a HBH inclusion, right, in the zone 15. But for this case, it settled in the zone 12. And when we run HPLC, it shows a significant pre-run peak here, which shows that highly suggestive of HBH disease. For the case number 7, we can see just a small pre-run peak here. Whether it is significant or not, it depends on the molecular findings, but the morphology support towards the HBH disease. So what is the finding? The DNA analysis shows that for the case number 5 with a 0.7%, it shows a positive for 3.7 and SEA deletion. So this is a case of HBH disease. All cases was tagged as A1 diagnosis in our HB analysis presumptive diagnosis. Therefore, for the CE, if we see the morphological changes with a very small peak like this, please do the HPLC as a second line. And for the case number 7 and number 6 and number 7, case number 6 is quite clear actually that this is a HBH case, but because of the small peak at the zone, the peak at the zone 12, not zone 15, so we still need HPLC as a second method. For the case number 7, we need to wait for the DNA to confirm that either this is a HBH or not. These results still pending. So HBH disease presented with a marked variation in phenotypic expression, as we can see from children up to elderly, we still diagnose HBH. Okay, so diagnostic sample, sometimes in HBH it may not be detected, but majority of case will show this finding small peak. It's like a case number 5. And second method HPLC need to confirm the morphological changes. Actually, if we are aware that when we do the comparison method earlier in 2014, there is a paper by Borbeli mentioning that HBH measurement was more difficult to measure by CE than HPLC. And the percentage of HBH in CE is lower as compared to the HPLC. So be careful when you use a CE as a first line. Make sure that you have HPLC for all cases with a very mild HBH disease. And sometimes in for the small peak, even in the HBH in the zone 15, zone 12, it can be interference of the plasma protein. And also in CE, we encountered a problem with the shifted zone, right? So we need to remember all of these analytical issues when we interpret the CE. So for the national standard for reporting of HB analysis, as we have done in May 2022, all cases with a small peak, zone 15, we need to correlate with the full blood count indices and the morphology. I think Dr. Munira already have presented last month with the normal HB, mild anemia, mild microcytic hypochromic anemia with code N, D13 and D16 do not require second method HB analysis. For mild to moderate anemia with features of anisopoikilocytosis, yes, we need to have HPLC as our second method, and that any cases that we suspected HBH. And the H inclusion is highly recommended for cases with suspected HBH. So all cases with a small peak in zone 15 should proceed with DNA analysis according to the diagnosis code. Okay. So a second small peak is at zone 2, significant or analytical issues. So this is I have of 4 cases. 4 cases is actually from a school screening program, a diagnostic antenatal, a diagnostic of anemia. Okay, this is a 16 years old. As we can see here, the HB is slightly low, which is 11.7 with a microcytic hypochromic anemia. When we do the HB typing, it shows that presence of a normal hemoglobin, which is A and A2, with a small zone 2 peak at 0.4%. For the case number 2, also just a mild anemia with a microcytic hypochromic indices, which is less than 80 and less than 25, with the presence of HBE and a presence of small peak at zone 2, which is calculated as 1%. So for the case number 3, this also shows a microcytic mild to mild anemia with a microcytic hypochromic indices with a small zone 2 of 1.1%. And for the case number 4, also this is actually a normal HB level with a microcytic hypochromic anemia. When we do HB typing, presence of HBE, which is calculated as 7.4%. At zone 2, there is presence of a small peak of 0.4%. So this is the finding of the morphology and chromatogram for all 4 cases. As we can see, there is a small peak here by the CE. The CE can calculate it, which is 0.5%. Small peak at the HPLC, usually the retention time between 4.9 to 5, which there's just a small peak here. I think all of us are very familiar with this. And then for the case number 2, a similar finding, but the percentage is quite higher, which is 1%. For the case number 3, also the similar finding, the percentage is 0.9%. And for the case number 4, there is a presence of E, right? Presence of E, which is calculated as 17.2% with the presence of E of 0.4%. So what is the findings based on molecular? As we can see, the case number 1 we tag as A2, case number 2 we tag as actually A2 as well. A2 as well. Sorry, this is a wrong code. Case 3 we tag as the C5, and case number 4 also as a C5. So as we can see here, for the HB DNA analysis for the case 1, yes, we found confirmed the HB constant spring with a peak of 0.4. But for the case number 2, also A2, but the percentage is higher, which is 1%. Usually we will find the molecular finding of combination of single gene deletion with a constant spring. So this is also A2 with compound heterozygosity. And the case number 3 is actually E with the combination, sorry, this one is not E actually, this one is also A2 with the combination of 4.2 with a constant spring, and case number 4 is actually E with a combination of compound heterozygosity, single gene deletion 3.7 and constant spring. So when we see, I just want to highlight that when we see the E is less than 20%, usually we will suspect this is a double gene deletion. Yes, this is a double gene deletion, but sometimes it can be a combination of single gene mutation with single gene mutation with a deletion, or is homozygous 3.7. It's not all lower E with less than 20% is with a double gene deletion. So for another case series, case 5, 6, and 7, actually at various age, the case number 5 is 1 year old, presented with anemia, investigated because of microcytic hypochromic anemia. When we run for the HB typing, it shows that a presence of normal HB with presence of 4.2% at zone 2, which is constant spring, and at BUTS area, which is zone 12, which is 1.1%. For case number 6 is actually from a school screening. We found that presence of zone 2, which is significantly high. As usually we see only for the constant spring is 0.4, 0.5. For this sample, we see that 2.5%, which E level of 18%, which is less than 20%. Looks like a double gene deletion. So for the case number 7, this one is a 9-month-old presented with anemia, severe microcytic hypochromic anemia with an isopoikilocytosis. Zone at HB BARTS level at zone 12, we detect a 2% of the peak there, and zone 15 of 6.7% with a zone 2 of 2% suspected constant spring peak. So this is the finding for the case number 5. As we can see here, constant spring is quite high here, 4%, with a suspected HB BARTS 1.1%. This is a morphology. The morphology is not very severe, probably still young at 1 year old. And this is the HPLC finding, shows a pre-run peak here with a double peak here. Okay, so this is at retention time of constant spring area, but we have 2 peak here. For the case number 6, we have a higher constant spring level as well, 2.5, with the E level of 18, and shows that just not very isopoikilocytosis, but we can see the microcytic hypochromic with the target cells and a few fragmented cells. And when we run HPLC, we expected the similar finding, which is there is a A2 level will be high, which is around 19% higher than CE, with a constant spring peak here, which is quite prominent, which calculated at C window of 2.7%. For the case number 7, yes, this is, I think, the typical picture of the HBH, which is non-deletional type, where we found the HBH zone and the HB BARTS zone at zone 12 with the constant spring peak here. So HPLC shows a similar finding. So what is the molecular diagnosis of a case number 5? Actually, for the case number 5, this boy had a homozygous constant spring. For the case number 6 is actually E with a homozygous constant spring. And for the case number 7 is actually the non-deletional HBH. And I think this one is quite common. All centers might have this diagnosis, HND SEC, which is we suspect by hemoglobin diagnosis, we will tag this as A3, right? So significance of small peak at zone 2. This is, I just do a retrospective analysis based on 5 years data from our molecular diagnostic alpha thalassemia. We have a total of 1,000 plus sample, which is around 10.5% from the 1,000 sample, around 1,000 sample from 13,000 sample, 10% were detected as HB constant spring based on the prelim diagnosis CE as a first line method. And more than 90% of the peak at zone 2 shows a positive result of constant spring by ARMS PCR. So actually, with or without HPLC, usually they are positive for a constant spring. So I would like to suggest that constant spring, for the constant spring peak, which is more than 2%, we need for further DNA analysis to exclude homozygous constant spring. And for the peak of 0.5 to 2%, usually the compound heterozygous between a single gene deletion with a constant spring need to be to suspect lah. But we still use the A2 as our code of diagnosis. So for the A2, it include actually heterozygous constant spring or combination of a single gene deletion with a constant spring. So is it necessary HPLC as a second method for E2HB analysis report? For me, in centers where molecular diagnosis of alpha thalassemia is easily accessible, single method of HB analysis is adequate as a prelim diagnosis of HB constant spring. And Based on our experience, CE is more sensitive rather than HPLC to detect a small peak of the CE, right, in our daily practice. So for those who use a CE as a first line method, it's actually adequate for us just to use a single method for all the thalassemia trait for our screening sample. So dealing with the HB variant using CE as a first line, so common HB variant based on 2 studies evaluated between CE and HPLC previously. HBE is clearly separated from A2, so HBE2 level is more accurate in CE in the presence of HBE. HBS was detected by both technique with a good agreement. HBC also was detected by both technique and had a good inter-assay agreement. HBD and HBJ as well can be detected by both methods. So we can choose either one of these methods to diagnose this type of HB variant. So no issues with E, S, C, D, J. Just for the E, when we use the HPLC as a first line, we're afraid of carryover contamination of the E to the A2. Sometimes when there is a many E in the samples, it can be carried over to the next normal sample, and the A2 might be slightly raised. We're afraid that we wrongly interpreted as beta thalassemia trait. So be careful for those who use a HPLC as a first line method. For those who use CE as a first line method, I think it should be okay because it can separate the E clearly from the A2. Okay, now we go to the case series. The first case is actually from the Form 4 thalassemia screening. The HB is normal. The MCV, the MCH is actually the MCV is normal. Just the MCH shows a slightly hypochromic. When you do a CE, we found that there is an increased HbF here. Which is calculated as 7.6%. We do not expect that this sample actually to have a high F, right? Because it's 16 years old. So we run HPLC. When we run HPLC, it shows that the F is only 1.1%. So likely this is not wrong sample because I have received a few questions from our pathologist. Is it I need to repeat a new sample? Actually, no need, because you run the same sample at least twice if you are really you are not sure. Then you can look at if the similar results came out, then you can just suspect, oh, probably this is a variant, because there is a peak here at around between P2 and P3. There is a peak here, shows that probably this is a variant's presence in this sample. So what variant it is? This is actually HBG Georgia. With HPLC previously, when we used as a first line method, we cannot detect this mutation. So this G Georgia is actually the alpha variant at codon 95 mutation of CCG to CTG. This is an alpha variant, clinically asymptomatic. It can have a slight anemia, but there is a case report from Thailand, from Prof. Supan. It shows that this G Georgia, the interaction between SAH deletion shows no HBH disease. So that it indicates that this HBG Georgia is not an alpha thalassemia allele. So the next case is actually also from our screening sample, similar findings with a normal mild hypochromic anemia. It shows that the presence of the unknown peak here at zone 15, between the zone 15 and 14. So this unknown peak is quite significant, which is 13.6% with a slightly low A2, which is 1.8%. When we run HPLC, whatever variant that we detected by CE or HPLC, we need to have another second method of the HB analysis. When we run the HPLC, it shows that presence of this peak at C window, which calculated around 4.2%. And at the P3, 11.6%. Okay, so what variant it is? is when we send to the IMR, is actually also the alpha variant, which is alpha 2 mutation at codon 51, GGC to TGC, which is a HB Hunan. So what is HB Hunan? HB Hunan is also still considered as a variant of unknown clinical significance. So far, no report of interaction of this variant with other alpha thalassemia or other HB variants. So you can read further if you're interested to know this hemoglobin variant. Case, this is the last case for variant. I think this is a 5-year-old Malay boy, is a cascade thalassemia screening from the family positive with a beta tau carrier, a beta tau trait. So what we can see here, a microcytic hypochromic anemia, which is MCV is less than 80, the MCH is less than 25, with a normal hemoglobin level, a normal iron as well. So we ran the CE, but nothing was found here except for the 3.3, borderline HbA2. So we do the further testing for the borderline A2. It found this is the actually heterozygous state of a HBCT of Hope, codon 1969 mutation. This is a rare beta variant. Heterozygous state is actually asymptomatic. It may cause clinically significant if the interaction with other beta tau mutation, and HBCT of Hope is an uncommon and silent HB variant. So that's why we like to suggest that for the borderline A2, we took a cutoff value of 3.3 to 3.9 for the CE and 3.4 to 3.9 for the HPLC. Okay. Okay, the last part is a discrepancy between presumptive diagnosis of HB analysis and confirmatory molecular diagnosis. Okay. So this is a 31-year-old female presented with anemia in pregnancy, which require a blood transfusion. So when we look at the full blood count indices, yes, it is a very hypochromic microcytic anemia. We can look here in isopoikilocytosis, support with hemolysis. And when we do the CE, we can see there is a HBH peak here. So with the low A2, when we run the HPLC, the similar finding. So based on HB analysis, it's quite a clear cut. Oh, this is HBH disease. So we tag as A1. So send for the DNA analysis to confirm. Unfortunately, we only found the homozygous 3.7. As we know, the homozygous 3.7 usually is just a trait picture, does not require any transfusion, does not reflect the HBH disease. So we do the duplex. Is it really 3.7? Because sometimes when we do the homozygous 3.7, we will have the discrepancy. But for this case, as we can see, yes, it is a homozygous 3.7. But the clinically is not a homozygous 3.7. It looks more toward HBH disease. We send to IMR for further molecular analysis test. So what is the diagnosis actually? When we sent to the IMR did MLPA, they found a large deletion, which is a GB deletion. What is a GB deletion? GB deletion is a large deletion covering both A2 and A1 genes. As we can see in the picture, this is for the 3.7 deletion, is only a small deletion, 1,000 over. But for the GB deletion, is a 2,000 over kilobases deletion. It's a very large deletion, cannot be detected by our molecular technique. So this combination can cause the HBH disease, as I mentioned earlier, clinically significant. This is data from IMR. This is unpublished data from Dr. Norafiza and Dr. Ezalia. Actually, we have this GB deletion, especially in a Malay ethnicity, which is Kedah and Negeri Sembilan, has the highest incident. Usually they're presented in heterozygous state with a very low HB level, which is with a very low microcytic hypochromic anemia with sometimes a normal HB level like SEA, like Thai, which is for the mean for this study is 13.1 for male and 10.32 for female. The MCV is less than 70, which is 64.5, 65.4 with the MCH of less than is around 20, mean that 20 or less, with mean HbA2 value still normal for the HPLC, also as for the CE. So any compound heterozygosity with a single gene deletion, as my case previously, and for this case, combination with the 4.2 with a constant spring with this mutation, it can cause the HBH disease. Apart from Malaysia, we also have found in a Brazilian patient for this paper was published in 2017. As we can see here, this patient was diagnosed with the HB of 8.8 with a presence of H. When they screen here with the normal arms and GAP PCR, it was negative, but when they do the MLPA, they found this GB deletion. And they have noted the father with a normal HB with a microcytic hypochromic anemia. There is a GB deletion for the patient's father, also for this case, P3 patient. Okay. So there is a limitation of targeted molecular analysis because some large deletion unable to detect or a rare mutation can't be detected by our ARMS and GAP PCR. This is our molecular method available in Malaysia. Okay. The latest one, I think we have NGS in IMR, Dr. Fiza and Dr. Izala is working for it. Beside that, we have a modifier gene that we need to look up for our patients, especially for these three genes, as MN1 polymorphism, KLF1, BCL2. IMR also can do this, but still in research, do not offer for the services. And in Malaysia, for our population, we need to look for the SAU deletion as well, because SAU is known to have, can aggravate our TDT patients' requirement of the transfusion. So we are offering this band 3 deletion in our center, HSB. Probably the official letter will be came out end of this year, inshallah. So the take-home message is for the screening sample, we should have a specific target for significant or common deletion or mutation based on population mapping. We need to have a cut-off value. If it a small peak, all the small peak is significant. We need to choose for the screening sample to be cost-effective, cheaper, and we need to have a good competitive method. For diagnostic sample, we really need to focus based on the case-specific approach, and we need to offer more tests with advances in the technology. With that, I think I end my presentation with thank you.
Kenapa tadi on stop? Speaker tu dekat sini projek. Wah, ni dah tak projek. Okay, buat apa-apa je ni. Okay, so dah. Ada?
Testing. Due to shortage of time, we are sorry that we have no extra time left for question and answer session for Dr. Hafiza. Thank you, Dr. Hafiza, for being with us today. Our gratitude to Dr. Hafiza.
Macam mana saya nak encode dia tak encode dia lagi?
Further enrich our understanding of thalassemia screening and diagnosis. A copy of acquisition to Dr. Hafiza will be sent to our event. Thank you, Dr.
Kita dah nampak free agent dah tadi. Dekat folder.
I would like to brief the audience regarding our event flow for today. We will have 2 more talks this morning, followed by lunch session, tentatively at 1 p.m. Kindly be informed also that the watch in the auditorium wall is not accurate, as it's about 10 minutes ahead from the actual time. I thank you for your participation. We shall now continue. Is everyone okay? Our next presentation is by Dr. Munira Abdul Razak from Hospital Kuala Lumpur.
Dr. Munira Abdul Razak has obtained her Master in Pathology in 2010 and is currently working as hematopathologist in Hospital Kuala Lumpur. She is actively involved in poster presentation, journal publication, and research projects, and has great interest in the field of thalassemia. I will now invite our third speaker of the day, Dr. Munira Abdul Razak. Please welcome Dr. Munira to the stage with her presentation entitled Genotype and Phenotype Correlation in Thalassemia and Hemoglobinopathy.
Cancel, try buka dia balik. Ini cancel je, just try je balik sini. Okay, share now. Window. Tak ada. Dah patut ke sini. So kita transfer ini. Tengok semua Wih. Tidak apa? Tidak tu. Saksi soal dulu. What's that? Apa? What's that? Tidak. Tidak ya? Tidak betul je. Sekejap. Aku tak masuk lagi. Internet tak ada. Sekejap Dapat tadi ni. Oh, itu file tu benda lain baru ni. Dia logo.
Siapa kita tengah settle.
Join lah. Tekan lah. Cakap je lah.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good afternoon. Thank you very much for organizing committee, pakar-pakar patologi and members of the club. Sebenarnya saya dengan Dr. Fiza ni duduk berdebar. Duduk tengok jam tu nak bawa traktor ke, nak bawa kereta speed. Hopefully we can finish by 1 lah. Okay. So basically this morning Dr. Nora dah explain about overall thalassemia in Malaysia and then followed by Dr. Hafiza. Dr. Hafiza pun actually quite a broad explain in alpha thalassemia, the phenotype of alpha thalassemia lah, roughly. So basically my presentation actually I concentrate on the genotype and phenotype of beta thalassemia. Okay. So go back to basic. Okay, basically beta gene and alpha gene located at chromosome 11 and chromosome 16. So kalau you all tengok, it start with epsilon on beta gene cluster ni, epsilon, gamma and delta and beta. And then in chromosome 16, you have zeta, alpha 2 and alpha 1. Okay, what is actually significant about this one? Okay, satu, kalau you all tengok, the way the arrangement of the gene ni in order the way they are expressed. Okay, satu is intrauterine is basically epsilon and then followed by gamma. Gamma is your mainly HbF kan. Lepas tu beta is in adult hemoglobin. Okay, alpha 2 and alpha 1 not much in terms of arrangement sebab kat sini kita tengok ada alpha 2 and alpha 1 gene only. Okay, lagi satu in terms of bila kita classify thalassemia kan, you all tengok kalau lah it mainly in deletion, okay. Kalau it involve beta genes, okay, then kita panggil dia beta thalassemia. Kalau it involve both delta and beta genes, kat situ kita panggil delta beta thalassemia. And then kalau it involve gamma genes, then kita panggil dia gamma delta beta thalassemia. Okay, tapi basically bila ramai yang not familiar with what is gamma delta beta lah. Selalunya kita most common our population beta gene, tapi actually we have small population of delta beta gene and also gamma delta beta thalassemia, ataupun nama lain dia ada kita panggil HPFS pun ada. Okay, one of the gamma delta beta ni di dalam group HPFS. Okay, 1 and 2. Okay. Okay, and a little bit on basic. Bila kita nak cakap pasal genotype ni, I just go back to basic supaya nanti bila I explain about the mutation, at least you have rough idea dari mana datangnya that mutation. Okay, so basically both alpha and beta gene and delta gene dia ada common structure. Okay, common structure ni consists of 5' UTR or untranslated region, and then dia ada cap region dekat sini, and then dia ada 3 axon. Axons is a coding region. Maknanya amino acid yang dekat axon ni yang akan translated into protein. Okay, yang you panggil alpha globin or beta globin, delta globin, that is from the coding region. And then it has 2 intervening sequence ataupun kita panggil intron. Intron ni non-coding region. Okay, and then there's 3' UTR here. And in 3' UTR there is poly A tail sequence. Okay, so remember you have promoter, you have cap, and then you have 3 axon and 2 intron. Okay. Okay, kalau saya nak tunjuk yang ni, this is actually I would just go very brief. If you're interested, then you go in detail. Sebab saya rasa kalau panjang sangat nanti tak sempat. Okay, so basically you need to understand this process so that you can understand. Kalau alpha thalassemia is easy. Alpha thalassemia mainly deletion. Deleted means the genes is deleted, then you don't have the production of hemoglobin because the gene is deleted. Tapi bila beta thalassemia, nanti kita nak belajar beta zero, beta plus, dari mana datang benda tu, then you need to understand this process. Okay, walaupun actually dia banyak lagi pre-transcription and post-translation process, tapi main of the mutation to it involve this process. Okay, first process start with transcription, actually to copy DNA sequence to make mRNA. Okay, this is mRNA. Why you need to copy DNA to mRNA? Because DNA is very big molecule. So dia tak boleh nak keluar ke cytoplasm untuk ribosome ni untuk translate dia jadi protein. So you need to copy into mRNA. Okay, and then second process is mRNA processing. Okay, bila mRNA processing, why you need to process the mRNA? Because mRNA ni is very unstable molecules. Okay, on its own dia tak boleh nak lama dekat cytoplasm of the red cells ni. Okay, so what process involved with mRNA processing ni? Satu, capping mechanism. Okay, capping mechanism ni, okay, capping. Nombor 2, polyadenylation. Yang poly A tu, kalau you all nampak poly A mutation semua tu is from polyadenylation. And splicing. Splicing tu basically nak remove the intron. Okay, so basically this is the structure of globin that I showed in previous slides. Okay, if you want to imagine capping dekat cap plus tadi, dari region cap plus, just like putting a cap here. Okay, and then there are the splicing. Splicing tu to remove the intron, which is non-coding region, sebab dia tak perlu untuk translation. Kalau dia ada, dia akan menyebabkan protein tu abnormal protein. Okay, and then last one we have poly A. Okay, polyadenylation. Okay, adding of poly A tails to this mRNA. Barulah kalau complete this process, barulah that mRNA is a stable mRNA, it can stay up to 3 days in the cytoplasma for production of proteins. Kalau ada involved in mutation dekat sini, dia akan leads to sama ada reduced production or totally absent of production of beta genes. Okay, so the last process is translation. Translation ni, okay, translation tu actually mRNA translated into amino acid and last kali is form a globin change lah. Okay, so it involve mana ribosome saya tak keluar kat sini, ribosomes and also tRNA. Okay, so tadi bila kita dah cleankan all the mRNA processing tu, dia akan tinggal ni lah exon 1, exon 2, exon 3 yang akan translated into proteins. Okay. Okay, and the other things is that kalau if you want to talk about the phenotype in beta or alpha thalassemia, you need to remember that actually our alpha and beta globin change must be balanced. Okay, bila dia ada imbalance between alpha and globin change, dekat situ barulah patient start to have symptom ataupun kita boleh tengok hematological indices dia berubah. And basically the rate is about 1 to 1.2%, 1 to 1.2. Okay, sebab itulah you all tengok sebenarnya alpha gene is slightly extra from beta gene. Sebab tu kalau case yang in case of one gene deletion alpha, sebab alpha ada 4 kan, one gene deletion tu some of the book just say it is a silent carrier. Silent carrier because the imbalance is very minimal, dia boleh compensate dalam ratio ni because ada slightly increase in the alpha change. Okay, so basis sebab itulah kadang-kadang kita panggil dia silent carrier. Some of the book call it silent carrier. Okay, let's go to beta thalassemia trait. Okay, clinical phenotype of thal trait. Basically, saya rasa semua tahu, okay, when you have 50% of the gene affected, classically they present F trait. Sama ada beta thal trait ke, alpha thal trait ke, delta beta trait ke, HBE trait, we call it trait. Okay, so if beta gene, one of the beta gene affected. Kalau alpha thal trait, one or two alpha gene affected, which two normals. Okay, so ratio di 50%. Okay, and then classical beta thal trait, usually they are symptomatic with normal hemoglobin or mild anemia, very mild anemia. Okay, okay, tapi okay, as pathologist lah, kita yang banyak dekat lab ni, kenapa kita nak tahu this is beta 0, beta plus, beta mild, beta severe, okay? Bila di dalam keadaan trait, bila dia trait, actually clinically dia sama. Whether you have beta 0 ke, beta plus ke, beta plus severe ke, clinical behavior is the same. Okay, the only difference is the hematological parameters. Sebab itulah nanti, okay, bila you all tengok the hemoglobin analysis, ada beta thal trait yang HbA2 dia high. Ada beta thal trait yang HbA2 dia borderline. Ada yang kita panggil normal HbA2 beta thal trait. Okay, sebenarnya dari mana datang that phenotype tu is actually back to the basic. Dari mana genotype ni, okay? So kalau dari segi hematological features, okay, hypochromic microcytic red cells ni, the more the severe the mutation. Okay, lepas ni ada slide. The more the severe mutation, dia akan lagi hypochromic microcytic RBC. And then compared to kalau HbA2 pula, the more the severe the mutation, the higher HbA2 will be. If you remember lah masa kita belajar undergraduate kan, okay, kenapa cells tu jadi hypochromic microcytic in IDA or thalassemia kan, sebab cells ni dia akan divide the cytoplasm and also the nucleus. And then signal yang bagi signal to stop division is sama ada nucleus maturation ataupun cytoplasmic maturation. Kalau cytoplasmic maturation tu is from the hemoglobin, dah cukup belum hemoglobin dan cytoplasm dia. So dalam thalassemia ni, kalau dia tak cukup production of globin, dia akan the cells will continue to proliferate sampai dia cukup hemoglobin. So lagi banyak dia proliferate, lagi smaller the cells. So you boleh bayangkan lah, kalau beta 0 kan, beta 0 dia reduce production, tak ada production of hemoglobin. So dia akan continue as the cell to proliferate sebab tu the MCV MCH is very small. Okay. Okay, so basically classification of phenotype of beta thalassemia based on mutation ni, there are two big group. Beta 0 tak ada question. Beta 0 means tak ada production from that affected allele. Okay. Kita ada dua beta gene kan. So beta 0 trait maksudnya satu allele tu tak produce any hemoglobin, tak ada any globin change, okay. Or beta plus. Okay, beta plus ni dia broad range. Okay, kalau kita ada beta plus atau beta mild atau beta plus atau kita panggil beta silent. Okay, dalam beta plus ni pula ada small mutation yang kita panggil beta plus severe. Clinically beta plus severe ni almost the same like beta 0. Okay, kalau dekat kita population, the most common beta plus severe is 15, IVF 15 ataupun IVF 658. 26. Apa Fiza? 264. 264. Okay. So ada dua je. Okay. Tadi Dr. Nora pun ada sentuh about that condition. Okay. Okay. So in beta 0 thalassemia, kalau you all nak tengok the mutation, sebab sekarang ni we already started to produce kita punya report kan. Dalam report beta tu kita ada sebut, kita bagi list. This is beta 0, this is beta plus, this is beta variant. So kalau beta 0 ni, it come out from two mechanism. Satu is memang deletion of the beta gene. Kalau deletion of beta gene ni straightforward. Dia deleted, so dia memang tak ada produce globin from that allele. Okay, senang. Okay, yang kedua is mutations. Okay, mutations ni usually kalau beta 0 is in coding region. Sebab kalau coding region tu, dia sebab dia tak boleh nak translate lah kan. Dia deleted encoding region kan. Dia tak boleh nak translate. Dia tak boleh nak produce the amino acid. Okay, ataupun small deletion causing frame shift ataupun splicing. Lagi satu common sebab tadi translation dia ada start dengan stop codon. Kalau lah dia ada mutation dalam coding region ni yang menyebabkan dia stop codon. So dia stop kat situ, dia tak boleh nak translate. Okay. So common beta 0 mutation adalah codon 41, 42 deletion TCCP ataupun IVS11, IVS1, okay, ataupun kalau beta 0 deletion 45 KB Filipino, SEA deletion, common in Chinese ataupun 961, actually taklah common tapi ada in Indian population. Okay, for example this one, okay, this is a case of beta 0 thalassemia trait. Okay, tadi saya kata the hemoglobin, the RBC is almost the same. Kalau you tengok semua beta thalassemia almost the same kalau beta thal trait. Okay, let's talk about MCV and MCH. Okay, beta 0 memang tak ada production of globin from that gene. So the MCV, MCH expected to be very low. Ini yang classical beta thal trait yang kita belajar dulu-dulu. Senang, HbA2 dia high, 4.5 to 5.5. HbA2 dia selalunya 5 lah, 5 plus minus 0.3 macam tu. And then the MCH, the MCH is low, biasanya 20 plus minus. Okay, that is typical classical beta thal trait. Okay, selalu dia arise from beta 0 mutation. Okay, this is beta 0 deletion. Okay, tapi kalau beta 0 deletion ni, dia punya MCV, MCH ataupun HbA2 dia depends pada dia punya deletion. Okay, contohnya kalau beta Filipino deletions ni, kenapa sebab kalau awak tengok kat sini, saya tak tahulah kecil ke besar ke, tapi saya nampak lah juga. Okay, ni HBB gene. Okay, it delete almost all HBB genes is deleted, tambah lagi area yang downstream dia deleted, tapi it deletes HBB gene. Ni delta gene yang saya tunjuk anak panah this beta gene. Okay, and then tadi saya tunjuk ada promoter kan, promoter region in up front of every yang promoter region ni paling penting sebab involve in transcription. Okay, untuk transcription to happen, transcription factor akan bind to promoter region and then barulah transcription akan berlaku. Okay, so what happened in Filipino ni, kenapa HbA2 dia increase? Sebab dia ada remove the promoter regions of the beta gene. Bila promoter region of the beta gene ni dah remove, okay, transcription factor tu instead of binding dekat beta ni, sebab beta dah tak ada, dia bind dekat next gene. Gene apa yang sebelah beta gene? Delta kan? Yang paling dekat tadi gamma delta kan? So sebelah beta gene is delta. So banyak transcription factor tu sebab dia dah tak boleh bind dekat beta, dia akan pergi bind dekat delta. Okay, so that in Filipino deletion you can see slightly higher HbA2 from typical beta thal trait yang 5.55, you can see higher level of HbA2 ni boleh sampai 7, 8. Okay, and then HbF pun slightly higher juga because the same. Lepas delta gene tu, sebelum delta gene tu apa? Gamma kan? Some of the transcription factor ni pergi activate gamma gene, so it has higher level of HbF, tapi bukanlah high more than 5, it's still selalunya around 5 lah. Okay, so if you see some of the studies yang reported the HbA2 and HbF levels in beta 0 Filipino ni, some of the reports ni tunjuk boleh sampai 7.7, 7.4. Okay, so basically is from 5 to 7, almost 8 lah. Okay, the HbA2 level. So it has higher HbA2 levels compared to classical beta thal trait lah. Okay. Okay, the other deletion yang beta thal trait ni, actually this is beta thal trait. Kalau awak tengok kat sini, MCV dia slightly higher walaupun dia beta 0, dia bukan MCV yang 60 ke yang 70 ke bawah tu. And then HbA2 dia macam classical beta thal trait 5.5, tapi HbF dia very high. Okay, so dalam case macam ni kita mungkin HB and RBC sama sebab dia trait. Okay, so dalam case ni kita mungkin fikir, oh this is high HbF, mungkin tak dia ada HbFS, mungkin tak dia ada delta beta thalassemia. Tapi the clue here is HbA2 is raised. Okay, so dalam deletion ni macam saya kata, the deletion ni dia ada special characteristic dia. Okay, so this is a large deletion, and then deletion ni, yang ni dia deleted gamma silencing region. Okay. Secara general, macam mana kita tak ada gamma gene high HbF in adults? Sebab bila kita dah masuk adults, okay, kita punya kita ada area dekat gene tu yang dipanggil gamma silencer. Dia akan activated bila adults. Yang gamma silencer ni dia akan go and inhibit production of HbF. Okay, what happened in this deletion is that the deletion tu pergi delete this gamma silencer ni. So bila tak ada sequence to inhibit gamma, dia akan stimulate production of gamma. So that's why in this case you can have high HbF of 15. Okay, so kalau kita tengok some of the reports ni, and this is by Dr. Fiza, Dr. Fiza ada publish series of series. Okay, kat sini you can see the HbA2 is typical of beta tartrate, tapi the HbF can be as high as 23, 15 to 23. This is from Ethernet, it's from 11 to 27. So actually this is the case of beta tartrate lah. Okay, even though kalau you all search, you all baca banyak-banyak, some of the researcher dia nak masukkan ni dalam group of HbFS or beta thalassemia. Tapi banyak ni kata this is beta thalassemia, okay, because HbA2 is raised. Okay, this is okay. So this slide is just very simple slide. Just want to show that even though we say it's beta 0 thalassemia, the HbA2 can be different. Okay, whether you can have higher HbA2 in Filipino deletion or you can have higher HbF in beta 0 SEA deletion. Okay. Okay. Next we go to beta plus. Okay, when I talk about beta plus ni, dia punya variable tu dia sangat banyak. Kan tadi daripada beta plus severe sampailah beta plus silent. Okay, so dia ada range of mutation dekat sini. So yang ni you boleh tengok lah. Okay, that mutation tu involve dekat promoter, dekat CAT, poly A, splicing. Kalau you all notice lah, dekat sini tak ada yang coding region, okay, sebab dia tak ada coding region. So kalau sebab dia involve di coding region, kebanyakannya akan go to beta 0, okay. Okay, this is an example of beta plus and this is example of beta minus. Okay, so lagi sikit the mutation, better the MCV, MCH and HbA2. Okay, so dalam keadaan beta plus mutation ni, you can see MCV is higher, okay, 66 plus 2, MCH pun higher 20 and HbA2 lower. Okay, kalau sebelum ni classical is about 5 plus minus. Okay, ni dah turun jadi 4.6 plus minus 2. Okay, dan kalau lah beta plus plus ni ataupun kita panggil mild, kita tengok the MCV tu dah naik to 70 and then the HbA2 started to become borderline. Borderline tu maknanya dia boleh selalunya kalau yang borderline ni ada yang boleh up to 4.2, 3.5 to 4.2. They kalau sometimes kita buat sebab dia range kan, sometimes kita can just diagnose from HbA aja dalam group yang kita kata consistent with beta tartrate tu, ataupun di dalam group yang kita kata borderline HbA2, please refer for untuk further with genetic testing. Okay, so this is a group yang akan ada dalam borderline beta thalassemia yang kita panggil borderline beta thalassemia. Okay, one of the common mutation yang kita detect dalam borderline ni adalah poly A ataupun CAT plus. Kalau you all tengok kita punya report lah, kebanyakan ni yang paling banyaknya adalah this one ataupun HB Malay lagi satu. Okay. Okay. Something about promoter mutation. Tadi bila saya bercakap pasal promoter ni, it's about transcription. Okay. Transcription factor tu akan bind ke promoter and then dia akan start transcription. This is the first process, okay, transcription. Tapi the problem with, bukan the problem, the characteristic of promoter ni, kalau you perasan dalam kita punya sequence beta sequence ni, kita bukan ada satu promoter sequence. Kita ada beberapa, ada 4, ada yang kebanyakan ada 4 MO lah, okay. And then sebab dia ada banyak, so dia tak kalau lah dia ada mutation dekat one of the amino acids ni, Okay, transcription factor tak boleh bind dekat sini, dia still can bind here and bind here. Sebab tu dia dalam dari segi phenotype dia jatuh bawah beta plus ataupun beta mi. Okay, so it depends. Actually lagi jauh the mutation tu from coding region, lagi mild the phenotype. Sebab kalau you all tengok, okay, dia kalau kira daripada kodon ni dia akan start dengan +1 sampai ujung lah, plus berapa ratus dekat sini. So kalau you all tengok kat sini, negative 28 dan minus 29, minus 86 ni dia masih masuk dalam kriteria beta plus. Okay, tapi yang minus 88 ni dia dah jadi beta plus plus. Okay, lagi jauh dia daripada coding region, lagi mild the phenotype. Okay, tapi special about promoter mutation ni sebab dia my beta plus. So kalau MCV, MCH dia bukanlah typical beta trait yang 60, 18, itu tak. Dia adalah my, so dia dalam 70 ke 78 MCH ni, tapi dia ada special characteristic. Dia HbA2 dia macam klasikal, dia 5.5. Sebab apa? Sebab the reason is the same macam yang saya bagi tahu beta zero deletion Filipino tadi tu, sebab dia involve promoter. So bila promoter transcription factor tak boleh bind dekat sini. So transcription factor tu pergi activate delta gene yang sebelah itu. So it can have higher HbA2 levels. Kalau you nak compare dengan saya kata tadi group my beta thalassemia tu, HbA2 dia dah low kan. Tapi this group is beta plus atau beta plus plus, tapi it has higher HbA2 sebab dia involve the promoter. Okay, sebab dia kacau the promoter region. Dia lagi sangat ke? Okay, last. Okay, silent beta thalassemia atau beta plus plus. Kat sini sebenarnya ada different researcher, ada different opinion. Okay, so some people call it subsilent, some people put it under my beta plus. Sebab dia actually this group of mutation ni basically basically the HbA2 ni kalaulah dia boleh borderline HbA2. And then ada group tu yang memang totally silent. Okay, totally silent tu yang kita panggil full blood count HB normal. And then totally silent. Yang tu actually betul-betul dalam silence. Ada satu group yang some people say it's subsilent, some people would say it's my beta plus, termasuklah kita punya poly A dengan cat plus. Kalau dia masuk subsilent ni, dia actually normal, tapi dia boleh je my hyperchromic microcystic red cell dengan borderline HbA2. Kalau totally silent group ni, full blood count semua normal. Itu yang kita kata, kita akan sentiasa bubuh disclaimer dalam kita punya report tu HbA. Kalau you report kan, kita bubuh cannot exclude normal HbA2 beta thalassemia. Okay, which is very, dan then kita pun ambil cut off 3.3 je kan, sebab kalau kita lower sangat-sangat kita punya cut off tu, which is mungkin kita tak detect di silence lah sebab dia memang silence kan, tapi kalau kita nak screen the whole population tu, it incur cost lah, dia tak efektif, and that is very rare. So sebab tu lah Dr. Hafizah dah ada publish paper on this borderline, so kita agreed kita nak ambil cut off 3.3 for us to proceed dengan DNA beta. Okay, so silent ni dia a bit different in terms of clinical sebab banyak reported kata kalau in homozygous state dia akan behave like beta trait. Okay, tapi remember silence ni, kalau silence ni dia plus compound heterozygous dengan other beta zero ke beta plus ke, sama dia akan jadi intermediate ataupun still dia akan jadi intermediate ataupun TDT. There are reported cases yang jadi TDT, ada reported cases yang intermediate. Okay, so yang silence ni basically in homozygous state tu dia lebih kepada di beta trait. Okay, this is examples of mutation minus 92, minus 101. Kalau you tengok dipanggil subsilent or sometimes they call it my beta plus ni. Okay, the MCV, MCH ni kadang-kadang normal, kadang-kadang hyperchromic. Okay, and then the HbA2 tu usually borderline. Okay, this is subsilent or my beta plus lah, ikutlah, boleh panggil dua-dua. Okay, tapi kalau real silence tu macam CAP plus 1480 ataupun IVS2 848 ni, kalau tengok indices dia totally normal. Okay, semua normal. HbA2 pun normal, so memang kita tak boleh detect by our full blood count screening ataupun HbA analysis. Okay, it's not detectable. Okay, macam this one, saya tunjuk IVS 2848 ni. Kalau you tengok this one, this homozygous state dia, okay, the only changes dia ada slightly raised HbA2. This is in homozygous. Sebab dia typically dia akan nampak macam beta tart in homozygous. Okay. Okay, just bear in mind, bila you all ada increase HbA2, when you call it borderline HbA2, dia tak semestinya semua borderline HbA2 ni akan turn out to be beta tartrate, sebab dia ada few causes for that. Salah satunya alpha triplication, okay, and usually alpha triplication on its own, maksud alpha triplication ni dia ada more than 4 alpha genes, okay, dia ada one allele mungkin ada 3, dia ada allele dapat 2, okay, so dia ada 5 alpha genes. So bila dia ada extra alpha genes ni, on its own clinically dia asymptomatic, tapi dari segi dia boleh stimulate HbA2 production. Sebab bila kita tengok balik, dia jadi imbalance. Sekiranya alpha ni jadi tinggi daripada beta sikit sebab dia terlebih alpha gene. So dia boleh stimulate HbA2, sebab tu dia boleh ada slightly raise HbA2, tapi biasanya the range is around 3.3 to 3.5. Dia tak pergi higher than 3.8, 3.9 tu unlikely on its own, okay. KLF1 mutation ataupun other causes ni, megaloblastic anemia, hyperthyroidism, liver disease. So bila you nak suspect the megaloblastic anemia, kalau MCV, MCH dia high, HbA2 dia borderline, it could be just megaloblastic anemia pun. Okay, dia bukan thalassemia pun. Okay. Okay, this is the same table yang Dr. Nora Esa tunjuk tadi. Cuma sebab tadi kan saya dah explain semua, kalau you all tengok balik, kalau dekat codon, this is coding region, okay. So coding region ni banyak yang merah. Red colour is actually beta 0. Okay, kita beta 0. Coding region ni dia ada 2 je possibility dia. Satu, kalau dia truncated ke apa dekat coding region ni, dia akan jadi beta 0 thalassemia. The other things is kalau dia tertukar kepada different amino acid, dia akan jadi variant. Okay, kalau you all tengok macam HBE, sebab HBE dia tukar kepada different amino acid, so dia jadi variant. Kalau dia stop di production, dia akan jadi beta 0 deletion. Okay, kebanyakan coding region ni dengan ni dengan ni. Okay, kalau you all tengok lagi satu, okay, tak banyak pun coding yang third exon ni ada beta 0 deletion. Okay, sebab yang dekat third exon ni kebanyakan mutation dekat situ dia akan produce the same protein. Okay, tu satu, tu baguslah. Tapi the other things is kebanyakan juga yang kita jumpa, yang kita panggil dominant beta tartrate, after this I will explain, juga dekat codon 3 ni. Okay, so kalau you all tengok dekat lain-lain ni, macam saya kata tadi dekat CAP ataupun dekat intron. Okay, intron ni, kalau you all perasan, intron ni, the first 2 intron and the last 2 intron tu dia akan jadi alpha 0. Sebab tu the most important part yang dia spliceosome ni akan bind untuk cut this part. Okay, so kalau tak boleh nak cut this part, dia memang akan jadi beta 0. Sebab tu lah IVS11, IVS11 ni, dia akan jadi beta 0. Okay, dia merah dekat sini. Okay, yang 15 ni, ataupun ni dia jadi beta plus severe. Okay, so roughly macam tu lah. Macam poly A, my mutation. CAP, my mutation. Promoter, lagi jauh daripada coding region, my mutation. Kalau tak, dia beta plus. Okay. Okay, so kita quiz. Okay, what's wrong with this quiz? Okay, RBC 5, HB 8.5, MCV 68, MCH 20, HbA2 5.1, HbF 5. Okay, typical hematological features of beta tartrate, tapi severe phenotype. Okay, siapa nak jawab? Beta tartrate tadi saya kata dia biasanya asymptomatic kan? So siapa nak jawab?
Ada apa? Assalamualaikum. Dr. Nick sini, Munira.
Okey, tolong jawab.
Ada gene modify. Mungkin ada apa? Another.
Farah.
Dengar tak?
Dr. Farah cepat. Dr. Alia.
Compound heterozygous dengan something else ataupun gene modifier.
Okay. Nanti tak sempat Dr. Afizah nak present. So saya bagi jawapan. Compound heterozygous. Something else. Compound heterozygous lagi. Dominant beta. Okay, lagi. Okay, I've mentioned earlier, triplication. Okay, there are few possibilities lah, genetic modifiers that worsen the clinical phenotype of beta trait. Satu tadi kalau dia ada alpha triplication or quadruplication. Sebab saya kata tadi, kalau alpha triplication or XO dia symptomatic, dia tak bahaya. Tapi bila dia ada combination with beta thalassemia, what happen is that dah lah dia ada tak ada production of beta kan. So sekarang ni beta rendah, alpha tinggi. So sekarang dia ada extra lagi alpha gene. Lagi tinggi alpha dia, more imbalance, sebab tu dia akan lagi symptomatic. Okay, so clinical presentation kalau beta trait plus alpha triplication ni, usually dia jatuh bawah mild thalassemia intermedia. Dia bukanlah sampai TDT ataupun severe intermedia tu tak. Usually dia mild thalassemia intermedia. Okay, ni tak payah. Okay. And then dalam case ni, kalau you all tengok, in case of beta trait kan, beta trait ni dia akan, kalau lah HB is lower, dia boleh ada slightly increase HbF. Kan? Selalu kita ada report kan, kalau dalam kita punya HB anak, kalau ada slightly increase HbF, you all report apa? Query acquired consents kan, grow up bone marrow semua kan. Okay, sama juga dalam ni actually. Bila the HB is lower, your marrow tu start to produce more. So you ada slightly increase in HbF. Is this a compensatory mechanism je? Okay, so you ada slightly increase in HbF. Okay, it's acquired causes. Okay, next is dominantly inherited beta trait. Okay, this group of dominantly inherited ni dia banyak dekat codon 3. Okay, so bila you all detect, you all tengok dia punya MCV, MCH, tengok HbA2 macam beta trait. Tapi dia severe presentation. So dia banyak dalam group ni dia jadi unstable hemoglobin. So dia precipitate. Okay, bila unstable hemoglobin, precipitate, it will toxic to the membrane of the red cells dan dia boleh jadi hemolysis. So selalu dia akan presented with chronic hemolysis. These are the type of cases. Kalau macam ni, walaupun you all tengok okay, ni ada few reports lah HB Florida, HB ni, dia selalunya typical beta trait, tapi you all tengok presentation dia more severe than beta trait. HB dia moderate anemia. So dalam case macam tu, walaupun you all report as beta trait, then you need to proceed with DNA for confirmation. Okay. Okay. Co-inheritance of beta trait with HbH disease. Okay. Ini pun you all kena suspect juga sebab some cases yang beta plus HbH ni dia tak keluar dia punya H dalam kita punya HbSCOCE. So kita tak nampak kat situ. So bila kita tak nampak kat situ, kita macam kita tak nampak. We cannot detect from HB analysis. Okay. So bila one of the differential that you should think is bila dia ada the presentation is not typical of beta trait. Okay. Okay, so kat sini saya tunjuk dekat sini one of the two papers lah, one papers lah actually. Dia tunjuk dekat sini, this is non-deletional HbH, this is deletional HbH. Kalau you tengok, kalau non-deletional tu yang HbH constant spring ke apa, okay, the HB ni 86, okay, it's around 80, the mean of 86, MCV, MCH ni almost the same dengan beta trait, cuma dia HB di lower. Okay, sama juga ni yang deletional group ni, actually the HB is around the mean of 9 and then lower lagi dia punya MCH. This is expected kan, sebab kalau kita tengok HbH constant spring dan HbH deletional, yang mana ada higher MCV, MCH? Without beta thalassemia. HbH constant spring lagi tinggi dia punya MCH kan. So expected lah bila dia concomitant dengan beta, dalam HbH constant spring ni higher than HbH deletional. Okay. So this is the difference. So dekat sini pun ditunjuk juga actually HbA itu is almost the same, tak berubah. The typical of beta thalassemia. Okay. HbA itu tak berubah, cuma yang berubahnya is anemia. And then kalau you tengok dekat sini, okay, kalau tengok dekat sini dalam out of 4 ni, satu je case yang boleh detect HbH. So you should suspect kalau clinically dia tak tally dengan beta trait. Okay. Okay, interaction between beta thalassemia mutation. Dah cepat ni. Okay. Okay, so tadi saya kata kenapa you all nak, one of the reasons why you need to know the mutation of beta ni, satu sebab you nak correlate dengan dia punya full blood count disease kan bila kita nak report. The other thing is sebab kita perlu ni untuk guides for genetic counselling when you have couple at risk. Couple at risk tu maksudnya dua-dua couple tu ada beta thalassemia and has tendency risk to get offspring sama ada thalassemia major ataupun thalassemia intermediate. Secara general, okay, the mutation tu kalau dia beta zero, partner beta zero, husband beta zero, wife beta zero, dia memang group thal major. Tak ada kompromi, dua-dua beta zero tak ada production, okay, ataupun beta zero plus beta plus severe. Group tu pun selalu akan presented dengan thal major. Tapi yang ada group, ada combination ni beta plus plus ke, beta E ke apa, dia masuk dalam group thalassemia intermediate. Okay, so dalam group thalassemia intermediate ni ada few yang di severe thalassemia intermediate. Severe thalassemia intermediate ni maksudnya dia detect later in life. Dia bukan detect macam major dekat 6 months. Dia mungkin 1 year, 2 years, 3 years dia detect later. Tapi after mungkin at the age of 20 years tu banyak dah jadi TDT. Okay, banyak dah TDT. Contohnya yang kita detect banyaknya HBE dengan beta plus severe. Okay, dia detect later at the age of 3 years, 4 years, tapi 20 years old tu dah banyak dah jadi dalam TDT punya group. Okay, and then the other TDT group yang bawah intermediate ni HBH non-deletional, HBH constant spring. Ada banyak patient yang HBH constant spring ni TDT dah sekarang, TDT. Okay, tapi kebanyakan HBH deletional is non-TDT. Okay, HBH yang non-deletional ni yang bawah TDT tapi deletional is non-TDT. Okay, sebab tu kita detect banyak je, kita detect HBH deletional ni masa dia pregnant. Okay. And then beta tartrate with apatification ni dia masuk bawah my thalassemia intermediate. And then kalau homozygous beta silent ni dia masuk dalam beta tartrate clinically. Okay. Tapi bear in mind, okay, still when a clinician treat patient, dia akan treat clinically. Sebab it's not easy also for us, dia sometimes dia correlate, sometimes dia tak correlate. Sebab kalau thalassemia ni kita tahu dia ada modifier kan, primary modifier, secondary modifier, tertiary modifier. So genotype ni just a rough guideline untuk kita bagi counselling to the parents. Okay, kalau gini-gini possibility anak dia macam ni, possibility. Tapi selalu bila kita bagi genetic counselling tu kita kena bagi tahu lah. Walaupun kita tengok mutation ni macam anak dia akan jadi mild beta intermediate, tapi ada possibility dia anak dia akan keluar sebagai severe dan severe phenotypes. Okay, sebab this is just a rough guidelines. Okay, okay, interaction with between beta and alpha ni common. Okay, so what happen is that bila dia ada beta thalassemia, beta globin change reduce, alpha thalassemia, alpha globin change pun reduce. So reduction of imbalance between beta and alpha. So dia jadi sama rendah. Okay, bila tak ada imbalance tu, phenotype better. Okay, and then basically what we can see from indices tu MCV increase. Okay, HbA2 more or less boleh slightly increase tapi no significant changes. So kebanyakan ni boleh jadi million. Okay, so you can see. So tadi saya kata kalau classical beta tartrate kita tengok yang HbA2 5.5, MCV 68, MCH 18 kan. Tapi kalau dia ada concomitant alpha, dia bolehlah naik jadi HbA2 remain the same. And then MCV dia 75, MCH dia 22. So naik dekat situ, MCV dia akan naik. Okay, so this is based on TIF. Kalau tengok study, this is all beta thalassemia cases kan. So ni beta dengan normal alpha, this is the MCV dia, this is MCV. Okay, this is beta plus 1 alpha gene deletion, sama ada mutation ataupun deletion dia this area. Ada je cases yang naik, tapi banyak cases yang not significant. Okay, tapi kalau lah dia beta plus 2 alpha gene, okay, you can see much different in the MCV. MCV dia memang naik. Okay, this is HbA2. Kalau you tengok HbA2 kat sini, not much different pun. Beta thal dengan normal alpha ataupun beta thal dengan group of alpha thalassemia. Almost the same. So HbA2 is not affected. Yang affected ni is MCV. Okay. Okay. So dari segi clinical presentation, okay, kalau lah patient tu ada beta zero group, beta thal major yang kita katakan, beta thal major ni, kalau dia ada alpha thalassemia, ada 2 alpha thalassemia yang mungkin will lead to milder phenotype. Satu is two gene deletion, yang kedua is non-deletional alpha thalassemia. Okay, so then this report says kata kalau lah beta major ni ada one gene deletion, not much of amyloidotic effect. Okay, dia kena ada two gene deletion ataupun non-deletional. Tapi dalam case yang beta plus, okay, sebab dia punya imbalance tu not that severe, one gene deletion tu can produce amyloidotic effect. Okay. Okay, next quiz. Apa ni? Okay. 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 23-year-old Malay female not pregnant, investigated for hypochromic microcystic anemia, no hepatosplenomegaly, no previous history of transfusion. Okay, HB dia low 7, MCH very low, HbA2 8.5, HbF 10. Okay, this is HPLC and this is CE. Okay. So, lebih kurang macam tadi kan? You boleh kata je tadi duplication ke, dominant ke, okay? So that's the differential diagnosis lah, okay? Tapi this is a case of compound heterozygous of my beta plus. Of beta plus, okay? So dekat sini HbA2 is slightly raised, HbF also raised. Tapi yang ni HbF dia raised tinggi sikit lah, dia tak macam yang 5% macam tu, okay? This is case of compound heterozygous beta plus with beta plus plus. Okay. So presentation dia lebih kepada mild thalassemia intermedia. Okay, interaction with beta dengan delta. Okay. Okay, beta and delta gene. Tadi delta gene is next to beta gene kan? Dia sebelum beta gene. Tapi kita tahu delta gene ni dia production of globin dia memang sikit. Sebab tu HbA2 kita very low dia punya percentage kan? So and then delta gene ni has no clinical significance. So selalunya on its own dia normochromic normocytic tapi dia menyebabkan HbA2 dia lower. Okay, dia normochromic HbA2 lower. So bila problem with delta thalassemia ni, dia bila dia lower dengan HbA2, susahlah kita nak diagnose kalau patient tu ada beta trait kan. That's the close tapi so kalau you all tengok MCV, MCH is very low, typical of thalassemia trait. Tapi iron pun dah excluded, beta keluar normal, alpha pun tak ada apa, so kita akan suspect alpha lah kan kalau HbA normal kan. So dekat situ you might think possible patient ni ada delta plus beta thalassemia. Okay, this is paper reported by Dr. Yus. Okay, Dr. Yus ni, okay, Dr. Yus reported, lupa dah minta permission nak present. Tapi ada nama kat sini. Okay, dah sebut. HbA2 development. Okay, tadi saya present kan, kalau 45 kg Filipino, HbA2 dia tinggi kan, 7.7, usually 5 to 7 to 8 lah, okay. Tapi dalam case ni Dr. Yus present, HbA2 dia turun sampai 2.9 to 4. Maksudnya dia ada beta plus delta sampai you all boleh je miss this case as normal. Okay. So kalau clinically you suspect trait, iron pun tak ada, then should think about combination of beta and delta. Tapi jangan pula semua kes you pergi hantar dia delta ni. Okay, sebab dia bukan common. Okay. And then kalau lagi satu yang normochromic normocytic, tiba-tiba HbA2 dia very low, itu pun cases you should suspect that actually is could be just delta variant or delta thalassemia. Tapi dia clinically not significant. Okay. Bila dia clinically not significant, indices pun selalu normochromic normocytic. Okey lah, ni nak tunjuk je. Kalau beta 0 contoh dia, codon 30 kan, 5.6. So dia boleh, bila dia ada delta ni, dia boleh jadi 3.5, 5.2 boleh turun jadi 3.5. Okay. Yang ni okey lagi. Kalau beta 0 plus delta, kebanyakan dia akan jadi borderline beta. So kita tak takut sangat kat situ. Tapi yang kita takutnya adalah case beta plus ataupun beta plus plus. Okay, yang borderline dia memang asal usul dia memang dah borderline. Yang ni okey lagi. 48 dia jadi borderline ataupun very borderline. Okay, tapi you all tengok the MCV MCH tu memang low. Okay, MCV MCH very low. Dan first bila you all tengok case ni mestilah kita kata D13 kan, betul tak? Kita akan kata D13, this group kita akan kata D14 kan. So bila balik keputusan molekular tu sepatutnya you all correlate lah. Okay, sebab kita bila report molekular tu kita tak ada iron profile. So kadang-kadang susah kita nak report. So bila sampai report tu nanti you correlate lah dengan iron profile. Okay, contoh yang ni you tengok ni yang beta plus plus ni 3.8 borderline kan. Dan dia originally pun borderline, bila dia ada delta tu dia dah normalize dia punya HbA2. So kes ni yang possible akan miss lah. Tapi bear in mind borderline delta pun rare, delta pun rare. Dia tak common tapi you just need to know lah. Okay, you need to know that these cases warrant untuk beta thalassemia DNA. Okay, okay, that's all. Tu ada terlambat.
For shedding light on the intricate role of genotype and phenotype. I'm sure all of us has benefited from the presentation. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Dr. Nurida Muhammad Tahir to give a token of appreciation to Dr. Munira.